Welcome to another session of Grade 9 Mathematics, Chapter 14, Statistics. Dear students, in this first part of the chapter, we shall be looking into a few terms associated with the concept of statistics and then proceed to the solutions for the NCERT exercise 14.1. Dear students, so first let us start with understanding what statistics is. Statistics is a study of the collection, analysis, interpretation, presentation, and organization of a data. I repeat, it is a collection, analysis, interpretation, presentation, and organization of data. In other simpler words, it is a mathematical discipline to collect and summarize data. The next question that could come in your mind is why is there a need to learn this mathematical science? Statistics these days is used in many sectors such as psychology, geology, sociology, weather forecasting, probability, and much more. The goal of statistics is to gain understanding from the data. It focuses on applications and hence it is distinctively considered as a mathematical science. I hope now we have realized what statistics is and the importance of learning the concept of statistics. Now let us quickly get to a few terms associated with the concept of statistics. As you could see on the screen is a biologist named Ronald Fisher. The fundamental principle of statistics was actually developed by the biologist Ronald Fisher who lived in England. His study in statistics led to the synthesis of the Darwin's theory of evolution and modern genetics. And hence, Ronald Fisher is known as the father of statistics. Data. Data is a term associated with the concept of statistics. Now, data can be defined as a systematic record of a particular quantity. It is the different values of that quantity represented together in a set. We can also say that data is a collection of facts and figures to be used for a specific purpose, such as a survey or analysis. When arranged in an organized form, you can call this data to be an information. Now, the source of data, based on which your data is divided as or classified as primary and secondary data, is also an important factor. Let us understand what primary data and secondary data refer to. As you can see over here, primary data are those data which are collected for the first time. You can refer it to as a raw data, whereas secondary data refers to those data which have already been collected by some other person. Now, if you consider the originality factor, primary data is original because these are collected by the investigator for the very first time. Whereas secondary data cannot be considered as original because someone else has already collected this for his own purpose. Now, if you consider the nature of the data, as I said, primary data can be considered to be in the form of raw data or in the form of raw materials. Whereas secondary data, you can consider it as a finished form. I hope you have understood the basic difference between a primary and a secondary data. Now let us understand a few more terms that are very important for solving this particular chapter of statistics in grade 9. The term frequency. Now we have come across this word term frequency in our previous grades too. Let us quickly recall that frequency is the number of times a particular value occurs in a given data. Say if I calculate the number of students who have scored say more than 40 marks out of 50 in grade 9, and if I have say 22 students who have scored more than 40, I can say 22 is the frequency which represents the number of students who have scored more than 40. Now using a frequency, you can make a frequency table. If you go by the definition, a frequency table is a table that lists items and it uses tally marks, that method of tally marks, to record and show the number of times they occur. Now, we will be using the concept of frequency table. We shall be constructing frequency table as part of the solution to the first exercise of this particular chapter. Now, let us understand what else are we going to learn in this particular chapter. Graphical representation of data. Now, there are different ways graphically a data can be represented, but in grade 9, chapter 14 statistics, in this year, we shall be discussing about the graphical representation of data using bar graph. Now, again, this is something that we have come across in our previous grades. A bar graph can be referred as a visual representation of data, which uses bars or rectangles of the same width, but then different height, representing different values of data. I hope you have understood these different important terms associated with the concept of statistics, and we have recalled a few as well. If that's the case, let us quickly get into the solution to the NCERT exercise 14.1. Let me read the first question, which says, give 5 examples of data that we can collect from your day-to-day life. Now, over here, all they're asking us to mention 5 examples of data that you can collect from our day-to-day life. Could you please recall a few examples of the few examples wherein you can present them as data, which is there right away at your home? Could be the electricity bill, isn't it, that you get at your home? Let me quote a few examples. It could be the number of students that are present in our class. That is also a data. It could be the number of fans, electric fans that we have at our home or say in the school. It could be the electricity bill of our house for the last 2 years. That can also give you data. It could be the election results that you observe in the television or that you read in the newspapers. It's again a data. It could be the literacy rate figures that are obtained from educational survey. Yes. So you may quote a few more examples, but I believe we all accept and agree to the fact that the 5 examples that are stated over here are all examples of the data that we can collect from our day-to-day life. I hope everyone is clear with the first question. If yes, then let us quickly get to the second question. The second question asks us to classify the data that we have used in question number 1 as primary or secondary data. Now, before we get to the solution to this second question, I want you to understand and recall what was primary and secondary data. So, primary data were those which were collected for the first time, whereas secondary data refers to those data which have already been collected by some other person. Primary data will be original, whereas secondary data will not be original because it was already collected by someone else for his own purpose. Now, if you have understood this and you have recalled well enough the difference between primary and secondary data, then let us try to classify the 5 examples that were stated in question number 1 as primary or say secondary data. Now, the first example that has stated number of students in our class. If I try to get a data of number of students in my class, say in grade 9 Aryabhatta that we are in, I have 36 students. So that is a raw data that I'm collecting, isn't it? So number of students in our class can be classified as primary data. Now, the second example that I stated, say if I ask you what is the number of fans that we have in our school or say at your home, you can actually count the number of fans. and get a number, get a data. So that is again an example of a primary data. How about the third example that I gave you? Electricity bills of our house for the last 2 years. Now, uh, if you go back to the electricity bills, you can get the data of what or how much consumption of electricity happened at your place. So the data that you collect from those electricity bills will again be of primary data. Whereas if you could see the fourth and the fifth example that I've stated, which is the fourth one is the election results obtained from television or newspapers. Now, please note the statement that I put, the election results obtained from television or newspapers. Now, the election results would be decided based on the number of votes that an individual has got. So, will this be a primary or a secondary data? This will be a secondary data because the primary data in this scenario is the number of votes that have been calculated or that have been voted by for an individual. So the number of votes is your primary data, and based on the number of votes that each of the individual contesting the election has received, the result of the election that you obtained from your counting of votes, which was your primary data, will be considered as the secondary data. So the election results will be considered as a secondary data. Likewise, the fifth example that we have stated, the literacy rate figures obtained from an educational survey. Okay, the literacy rate figures, that is the final figures that you obtained as part of a survey. So this will also be considered as a secondary data because primary data over here refers to the initial data that is collected from person to person, from one home to the next home. Okay, so that will be considered as the primary data, and those primary data are then collected, are then analyzed, and then which gives us the literacy rate of a particular geographical region. So the literacy rate that we obtained as part of a survey would be considered as a secondary data. Now, this is the same that has been discussed over here. Primary data is the information which is collected by the investigator herself or himself with a definite objective in his or her mind, like the first, second, and the third example. Secondary data is the information that was gathered from a source which already had the information stored. So such informations would be referred as secondary data, and the examples were example 4 and example 5. So dear students, I hope you have understood a few basic terms that are associated with the concept of statistics, and you have understood the solution to the questions of NCERT exercise 14.1. This is all for now. Take care of yourself until we meet next time with another session of grade 9 mathematics. Thank you.